Hello everybody, welcome to number 27 and to the BMW 1M. This is a car that succeeded against all the odds. There was a problem with the name. The upper management never wanted it and it had the wrong engine. Yet it is still one of the most desirable M cars ever. Before I drive it, let me tell you about the most controversial aspect of the 1M, and that is the engine. It's controversial on two levels. Firstly, because it is not a real M engine. Despite the fact that it says there, quite large letters, powered by BMW M, it really isn't. It was taken from a 3 Series 335i and from a Z4 S-Drive 35, so quite humdrum origins. But there was an even bigger problem. No M car previous to this, apart from the X6M, which was never considered a real M car anyway, had turbocharged power plants. The BMW engines for these cars were always very high revving. You know, they were sort of racing heritage engines. This was the very first one to be turbocharged. Now, if you ally that with the fact that a lot of the parts on this were quite pick and mix, it originally had the fans quite worried. Let's take it out and I'm going to tell you why, quite fortuitously, having the wrong engine and those other things I mentioned about the management and the name, in the end, really played to the 1M's favour. On startup, then you'd be justified for being with the naysayers because it doesn't really sound special at all. I had an M135i before and pretty much the same thing. It is, to be fair, the same engine, but I think this has an overboost function that my old M135i didn't have. All the same, it feels very familiar, feels like the same engine. At slow speeds, it doesn't feel like a particularly special unit. Before I tell you how it drives, let's go in a little bit more to those difficulties that I'm saying this car faced, because they are intrinsic to the way it turned out. So the name, for example, 1M, why not an M1? When it first came out, a lot of people thought that's because BMW didn't really think that it was a real M car. The official reason was that there was already an M1, of course, the original BMW supercar, which was actually built by Lamborghini. But anyway, the name added initially to the doubts about whether this would be a pure, good M Division car or not. Even more tellingly, upper management were never very convinced about producing this car. They didn't want to do it. So a group of engineers in their own time developed it. That's also why it ended up pretty much with the whole back end from the current, then I think it was the E92 BMW M3, just grafted on. So the brakes are from that car, the whole back end, the suspension, everything. The limited slip diff is from the M3. Whilst this made it feel like a bit of a bitzer, it also has some advantages, which I'll go into. And let's get back to the engine now. That N54 unit, 330 horsepower. Let's see how it goes. I'm a little bit gobsmacked because it feels significantly quicker than my identically engined M135i. Why? I don't know what. Oh, it must be the overboost function. I don't know, it feels like it punches a lot harder. Let's also do a little few things here. So I put it onto M, which gives me sharper throttle response, and also there's 3 traction control modes on: MDM or M Dynamic, I think it is, which gives you a little bit of slip, and then fully off. I've got it on the halfway house, that's where I'll be keeping it. The front end is just monumental. Another big criticism of my old car was that the steering was absolutely pants. It really was horrible. Electric steering, variable rate. It could be quite quick, but what it masked was absolutely zero feel. It felt artificial, it was horrid. Now, a lot of M cars that I've driven, the steering is never the best part of the car. I don't know why BMW just don't seem to make great setups. This, definitely better than on the M135, because there is some feel. It's a little bit more natural, but it's not brimming in feel. What helps it greatly, though, is the front end of the car, which is obviously part of the way it steers. That front end is so tied down that you can go into a corner really confident that you can do absolutely what you want with it. You can go in, push hard on it, and you know it's just going to be rock solid. The back end feels like there might be a little bit more movement in it. I haven't felt it yet, but when we get to the S's, I'll try and push it a little bit more and see what it does. It's a bit of a thug, this little car. The way it responds to the throttle, the way it goes, that short wheelbase. I think a lot of people say it's pugnacious, and I would absolutely agree with that. Really precise steering. It carries so much corner speed. And then go in a little bit of push wide there and a little bit of back end movement, but the traction control caught it before anything worse happened. I don't know, some people said that there wasn't any measurable turbo lag. There definitely is. It's not monumental. I'd say, I don't know, maybe a fraction of a second, but it is definitely there. Let's do another pull. I'm just going to move the camera as well. There doesn't seem to be much point revving it past 5.5. It will happily do it, but feels like things are sort of tailing off a bit by then. The suspension is quite stiff, but the damping is good, so it's obviously a car which is built to be driven fast. If you're on this same road and going at maybe 40 miles an hour, it would feel quite, you know, you'd feel every bump. It would feel, I think, as a daily, driven at normal speeds, it's not ideally suited to these roads. But when you're driving it as it's meant to be, which is as a scratcher, even on a bumpy road like this, and it's so small, so it's easy to place, the steering is direct, the steering is precise, then it works really well. It controls body movement. Now, this particular car has some upgraded H&R anti-roll bars, but I don't think they'll be making a huge difference to the way it rides. They might make it corner a bit flatly. Gear change is that typical BMW feel. It's got that slight notchiness, not enough to get in the way. Just so you know, it's light and lightly notchy. It has that typical BMW feel. So the three disadvantages I talked to you about, how do they actually work to make it such a good car and to have made it so legendary? Well, first of all, the name. Because it is a 1M and not an M1 or an M2 or whatever, in itself, that begins to differentiate it. It's unlike any other proper M car. Then, the fact that the engineers had to work on it in their own time, that it's a bitzer, that it has bits taken in from all sorts of other cars, actually makes it feel even more special, a bit like a skunkworks sort of car. And the engine, it definitely does what the car needs, more than enough power. But it's not a thoroughbred. It doesn't feel special in that way. It's a little bit rough as well. Well, that works with the character of the car. This is a bit of a brute, this little thing. And having the engine that develops the power in that way, comes in a big thump, it does suit its character absolutely perfectly. Also, don't forget that if they ran with a full M-spec engine, it would have caused other problems as well. It would have brought it too close to the M3 in price. So this made it more accessible, and it means now, if you get a problem with the engine, it's much cheaper to fix. The fact that it has those M3 bits, the whole rear suspension, including I think the subframe, was just taken wholesale from the M3. That's also why it's so ridiculously wide. 2 inches wider at the back, 3 inches wider at the front, so it has those comically blistered arches. That also helps the look, as do those amazing CSL wheels. In terms of the interior, it does have some little accents here and there. It has the Alcantara with the orange stitching, which really does help lift it and make it feel a little bit extra, let's say. On the whole, it is a massively likeable little car, and it was a complete accident that it all works so well. The limited numbers have obviously helped to make it a bit more of a legend in the UK, but even if it had been produced in bigger numbers, it is one of those cars that is just very right. If you want to see a video on another M car, the black sheep of all the M's, much maligned, but perhaps in some way unfairly, have a look at this video that I did on the E36 M3, where I explain why it's so hated and why perhaps that's not right. If you have a car that you would like me to do a video on, then please get in touch either by email or on Instagram. Thank you all so much for watching, and I really look forward to seeing you for the next video.